Welcome back to Hot Mess Espresso, guys. If you are a millennial, like a good chunk of my listeners, you will absolutely understand that if you're not with a long-term partner, dating is currently a fucking hellscape. So to chat more about that, we have Phillip Quinones on the podcast today. What is up?
What is going on?
Well, not much, just trying to avoid the dating apps.
No, I understand that it's looking like for the birds for most.
I like let's just start off by saying, especially in the area I'm in, I'm literally seeing the same people that I saw on there 5 years ago before I got with my ex-husband. And it's like, this is what I got to work with. This is it.
Yeah, understand that for sure.
So you are a relationship therapist, also like, a general therapist, but you definitely kind of dive in a little bit more to relationships and stuff. What are just some of the things that you're noticing with counseling couples or even counseling individuals with relationship issues?
Um, it is a part of your life that you are not prepared for. I believe that having a child and formulating a partnership in order for reproduction purposes is something that no matter how much you read, no matter what culture you come from, no matter how much insight you have, when you have to do it yourself, it requires you to really have to learn on the job.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not something that's taught in school, it's something that is life taught. And what I'm noticing is that people have a struggle understanding what is actually really required to make those things work in the long term.
Mm-hmm.
And there is no other area in your life as you've been brought up to that point to make that decision to replicate that.
Mm-hmm.
You can sit there and say, oh, yeah, like when I was in high school, I know that I have 50 minutes on this subject and then I have 50 minutes on that subject. It's pretty much the same setup, it's pretty much the same syllabus. When I play a sport, it's the same game, it has the same amount of quarters, it's the same objective. When I um, go see and socialize with people, there's certain type of settings and rapport that is to be expected when I go to birthday party, when I celebrate holidays. But this, as you become an adult and you are in that prime of reproduction, it is something that does not prepare you for that. So communication, taxes, and financial literacy has not been taught to us. And that's something that we kind of have to learn on the fly. So when
Mm-hmm.
I'm working with these couples, I have to really start fresh. It's not really about really the problem that brought them to therapy. It is about two individual experiences coming together to make one. And
Mm-hmm.
they struggle with people because they're like, well, I haven't made that type of fusion together with another person to this level at this point. So they struggle with that. So it's really two individuals that have their own problems because a relationship really doesn't. So I have to break that down from how they were raised, what their values are, what their perspective is, what culture they come from, possible mental health issues that get in the way? Are there addictions? Are there possible, actual, real traumas that are preventing the connection or causing controversy within the relationship? Because it may be that you only see it from, oh, we have a problem. I'm like, no, there are other ways to look at the problem and how it's affected. So that's usually what I'm really noticing when I'm working with couples.
Yeah, you don't think about that, like all of those little micro facets kind of all contributing as one for sure. Like everyone just thinks it's just communication or something like that. But it's how you were raised. It was, how your parents modeled relationships, which
Really.
for a lot of us was not great.
Yeah, you know, I, 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 I like to say that people operate within the level of awareness that they have.
Hmm.
And I think it is unfair that the generations before get a bad rep for that because they did not have as much information, as much education on the things that we have developed up until this point.
That is true.
So, um, I, and it's a humbling experience that every generation within any type of field or any type of new innovation has to go through. Like, oh, y'all have this, like we had that, and it can go from the medical side to mental health. Like, we just knew what we knew and operated within that facet. So it's great now that it's a this past or new generation has really focused in on, oh, like we can really dive into how we behave with each other. And yeah, now that we look back, there were things that we could have done better, but I don't think necessarily we should fault it like that. Like if you were raised by some decent human beings and you had a decent household, I think that was the best that they could really do.
Right. No, 1,000%. And to kind of jump off of something that you said, I really feel like, especially as we become more aware, it's actually making dating like worse because like I've done the work, I've, really worked on, and look, I still got my problems, trust me.
Yeah.
I still got my issues. But when you're like in your 30s, it's almost like a crossroads where you're either going to kind of continue your, your habits from your 20s, or you're going to be different and you're going to do the work and this, that, and the third. And I think that's what makes dating hard in your 30s is you're dealing with a lot of people that have zero desire to actually like work on what they need to. And it's like, oh, this is what I'm stuck with. Like I'm just better on my own. And I think also people are getting more comfortable being on their own.
And I think that in and of itself is a huge problem. So the way that I look back on it is when you are curious about why something isn't working, sometimes objectively looking at the problem is the most helpful thing that you can do. So, yes, you have an experience with it, but then it's like, well, it's not working. Well, then also, have you actually taken, were you kind of just thrown into it?
Hmm.
When you started to get urges in middle school and, your reproduction stuff was starting to come on and you started to, really see women and men differently. You started to have boyfriends, you kind of just thrown into it. But now you become an adult, you have continued that cycle of just, oh, I'm just along for the ride. But when you take yourself out of it and you really ask yourself, well, what is dating? Literally, just the question, what is dating? Okay. Dating is not understood by what most people think that it is. And the reason why is because they think dating equates to formidable relationships, and it doesn't. So let me give you an example. Like here in Atlanta, Georgia, we have a art museum, and I went a couple weeks ago, and the person that I with was talking about how some of the paintings at that period of time, the women would have their breasts out, and that was kind of normal. Or some pictures may have the men's genitals exposed,
Hmm.
and so you look at it now in modern 2025 times and be like, well, that's a little odd. Obviously we learned about that, or hopefully at least I learned about like the different eras of art and the expression of what that time period involved. So it wasn't a sexual thing. It was a symbol. It wasn't just the man's genitals, it was masculinity, it was something else. But you just see it now, it's like, oh yeah, that's what it is.
Hmm.
But it's the same thing with dating. Like there is a romanticism that is transitioning in modern times. And
Right.
people don't understand that transition between what used to happen years ago and what we're doing now. Because even just like the art, we're not drawing the same art from the 1800s anymore. So it's a weird period of time that we're transitioning relationships because they used to be different. So you went from relationships being um, nothing to do with romantic feelings. It was a business. it still is a business. It was a transition for men to withhold power from women. They had no say in anything. They were contracts. They were things that when you put acknowledgement and agreement, when you download something, that they were just a checkbox to say, yeah, you can have this and you can do that with my data and you can do that as long as I get what I want. So it was a way for the patriarchy to continue to control women. Now, as that transition to modern times, you change that from women to have their own individuality, which was great. But then you change from relationships being more of a collectivistic mindset of family and dreams to then individual culture of romanticism. And so what's happening now is that people are not seeing that dating is not relationships. And people don't know the difference or sit back and say, oh, this has transitioned throughout time and this has been different. The difference is that you wanted to stay like the old times, but you're not keeping up with the modern times. And every single side has a different perspective about that, but nobody wants to talk about that perspective.
Yeah, no, I 1,000% agree. I also feel like we're all so afraid of being vulnerable and being open that we're trying to keep things as serious but casual as possible, and you can't have both.
No, you can't. I'm glad you mentioned that. So, what happens, there are pros and cons to any type of movement. Okay. Even if you took it outside of dating, there's a pro and con to different setups of structures. You can have a monarchy, you can have an empire, you can have a uh, democracy, you can have egalitarian, you can have communism. That's at a macro level of different structures of things. And then when you get to the micro level of things, you can have different perspectives of the pros and cons that come with social with different type of movements. So one of the main movements that really complicated dating, not and in and of itself changed it forever going forward, at least here on the Western side, is feminism. And so what happened was is that it I don't think it was necessarily not predicted. Let me talk about what's not predicted.
Mhm.
But it was great in one facet of life to continue the progression of a woman being able to have her own self-sufficiency from a individualistic standpoint to a federal macro level and in the law for her to operate. Okay, so which is fine. We can do better pay, better jobs. She can vote. She can even up until literally before the 1980s, women couldn't get a credit card.
Yeah, I
Right?
think it was like 1974. I
Yeah,
think that you could
right.
finally
So,
get a credit card in your own name.
right, which is fair. So in that aspect, there was progression. The difference is that that also changes the dynamics in other areas of life. And so when it became the same strive for equality and the tangible things that a man can be able to do, that affected dating. And what happens is that now in modern times, you want the structures of what was happening before the feminist movement to be implemented or at least be the measure of what it looks like to have a relationship and go about having healthy reproduction with another man. But what you don't realize is that because of this movement, you get nothing of that. So you can't stay the same and want to change. That's just not how it
Yeah, that
works.
that's not how it works.
That's not how it works. You can't have, I want the benefits of what was in the past, but but I want to still have what I want to have. You can't have that perspective. If not, then go back to when all of these things weren't changing to benefit you. That structure was different. That patriarchy was different. Relationships and different movements and what was going on was different. And so people are not understanding in modern times that affects dating. And people don't sit back and really look at it from that perspective. And that's why it's not working for most people.
No, I definitely think there's like a breakdown in things. Like there's a book, I'm gonna fuck up her name, but I think it's Eve Rodsky. It's called Fair Play, and it was basically about like how women still like take on a good chunk of the mental load while working 9 to 5 and everything else. So they're working 9 to 5 and then they don't get to shut off. They don't get to just like clock out and go home. And I'm not saying all men are like this, because I know for a fact my ex was very like big on splitting the workload and stuff like that. But I also know of a lot of relationships where a lot of that leads to divorce, because it's like the women are working just as much as the men, but the men clock out. And I'm just saying, like, when I say the men, just for all of the male demographic here, I'm saying like the partners that I know of. So they'll clock out, they'll go home, and then they think that they're completely clocked out. They don't like, really help with the kids or, do the grocery shopping or anything like that. That still kind of falls on their female partners. And I know that there's a movement to kind of like make men more aware of that, because it's, you people want 50-50 on like finances and stuff like that, and that's great, but also there needs to be like a 50-50, hypothetical 50-50 on splitting the housework and splitting the mental load and stuff like that. And I think that's where a lot of the disconnect in relationships are, because women are, working and doing all of the things, and it's just it's I don't really know how to describe it, but like I know I've experienced that before, and it is beyond frustrating to be working and also like completely taking care of the house and everything else. If I was like single and living on my own, yeah, totally understandable. But when I'm in a partnership, like, you have eyes, like you see the dishes need to get done. I don't need to tell you to do the damn dishes. You know what I mean?
I understand that. I think people can't even get to that point, really, because when it's talking about dating, most dating, again, it kind of ties into social movements because part of the transition from what it used to be, where women were not as um, incentivized to be more promiscuous. There was sexual liberation that came along with that. Now, the difference of applying that now and why I say that is because the same thing that is liberating you
Mhm.
also affects the other side. And we know that from physics, everything has an equal and opposite reaction. And energy isn't destroyed, it's transformed. So, with that being said, men are not incentivized to have to become aware of those things. So if you wanted more options, now men have more options. If you want to be more promiscuous and you wanted to have more sexual partners, now men have accessibility to more sexual partners. So there's no incentive, and people were having sex before marriage. Let's not talk about you had to be married in order to have sex. Like that's not true. If not, like we wouldn't have been 8 billion people. That's not
Right.
logical. Like sex was happening way before this stereotype of you men aren't getting laid before sex. That's not freaking true. So with that being said, men have two things that are happening in modern times that don't incentivize them to become aware of those things. One is with the accessibility that women have in order to partake in sexual activities, now men are able to do that without having to make any type of investment into
That.
that woman emotionally, financially, spiritually, mentally. I don't have to because now it is something casual. So now you're saying that, oh, I have to become aware of those. So now that I have accessibility to more women that are doing the things that I want them to do, why would I then settle down and have to then be with a woman that is going to tell me to do the dishes? or that is going to tell me to be aware of my 9 to 5, or tell them that why don't you care about my emotional needs. I don't, if I don't want that and I'm not incentivized to do that and I have no risk of taking that on, why would I want to do that? Because any benefit that I can get from a marriage, I can get from just dating. So it doesn't grow men up in that way, but we shouldn't put a negative connotation on that because with that movement, y'all decided for it to be that way. You just wanted to say, oh, now I can do what you do,
Mm-hmm.
but I still want you to still be the same of this classy, chivalrous type of man. That was not going to work, even from like a minimalistic standpoint, because men partake in sexual activities more than women on average throughout their lifetime. So the other part that is not incentivized for men and based on biology is the fact that we can produce life whenever we want.
Yep.
And a lot of women really don't understand that aspect of being able to have that type of freedom based on our biological differences, of being able to sleep with you and 5 minutes later sleep with another person. I can be producing life as much as I want.
Mm-hmm.
I am not a woman where you have a set amount of time based on your biological and reproduction setup in order for you to produce life. So it matures you faster to become more self sufficient, have more of a setup, have more maturity about the decisions that you make, and you can't take more risk than men because sex is very risky for women. It really is, which is why they don't do it as much. What that does is it puts you in a rock and a hard place because it's like I'm trying to get to this point, but then I'm not meeting men that are getting to that point. And it's not because men don't want, certain men don't want that. It's a fact of they're not incentivized to do it.
That right there.
So unless the only thing that I really sat back and really thought about is even if Philip were to say, well, what is the incentive for Philip to want to be legally obligated to another woman? And the only thing based on a moral standpoint is the psychological benefits of having two parent households for a child. So if Philip doesn't want a child, I literally have no incentive to do that. And I think a lot of men understand that standpoint. And then it makes it harder to find that woman because, again, everybody's being promiscuous. Everybody is now conditioned to not know what it takes to formulate that. And then again, now that you have so much experience with that, it's hard to settle down. It's hard to say, now I want to have a household. But at this point in time, again, I'm kind of like, well, if I personally don't care about these other aspects of your life and I'm not incentivized to do it, I can just go find a woman that is okay with that. And that's a really hard position that comes with the pros and cons of this movement. And I think women don't really acknowledge that, but I do think that men understand that because they reap the benefits of it.
Right.
They really do. So it kind of sucks for both sides in its own ways, but that's how you kind of have to look at it.
Do you think that is also why, especially in like our day and age of dating, it is more situationships than relationships?
Yeah. One of the things that people aren't aware of is again, not only the exchange of sex between people has become and is more acceptable, it is the things that happen around it. So when we look at the question of why aren't people necessarily getting married? Why aren't people incentivized to settle down from at least a legal standpoint? One is medical technology. So when the pill came around and women were be able to have birth control, which was another thing with the feminist movement, you then had the ability to control your biological and not your biological, but your reproduction cycle, which then exponentially gave you more economic purpose and more self sufficiency in order to start catching up to men. So, with that being said, now again, it is also a pro and con to that because even though that may be an asset to y'all, that you're able to control that for yourself, it also means that men don't, men have less of a risk to participate in situational ships
Hmm.
because she's not going to get pregnant. Woo, let's go. Like, bro,
Right.
saying, like, let's go, like, for real. Like, okay, so you want to be promiscuous, you're down to have sex more. I don't have to marry you. I have no financial or any type of legal obligation to you, and you don't have to get pregnant. You see the devil's advocacy when it
Hmm.
comes to that. So that is why. So yes, again, it benefits you in a different facet of life, and it's a great tool. And one of the, at least for me, reflecting now, one of the greatest inventions ever, to be able to manipulate that from your body.
100%.
But it also comes with why there is so much situationships because it doesn't incentivize a man to take on uh, to have more risk to participate. And again, if you're not on it and you're not like that, somebody is. And it can be in my hometown, it could be up the road, or I can get on a plane and go across the country to somebody else. So it's not, it's a very hard thing for men to grow up and find an incentive to not do anything besides a situationship.
Hmm.
It's hard, and that's an unfortunate thing for good women that, again, at some point in time, want to create formidable relationships and a family for themselves.
No, I 1000% agree because I feel like there's also a difference between taking things slow and winding up in a situationship. Like, we can get to know people for like a couple months and then, be on the whole, have the conversation of, are you seeing other people because I'm not seeing other people and I would like to only be seeing you kind of thing. And then, just have some exclusivity to it. But I feel like a lot of people aren't willing to be honest with themselves on what they want and honest with like their partner. Like you see it on dating apps all the time. It's like, what do you want? Like short term, open to long. And I'm like, what the fuck is that?
And it's funny you said that. So I think I have two perspectives to really try to add some value to that.
Absolutely.
One of the things that I heard was from a podcast, so this is not my original thought, but it makes sense, is they researched the data that comes from dating apps. And so one of the things that they notice is that if a man puts on his status that he is only looking for short term relationships or casuality, he is less likely to be selected. So you are purposely being set up to be lied to because trust me, every single man, no matter how moral his compass is, wants to have sex with you. Now the difference
Yep.
of those reasons may are up to the individual, but it shows and again doesn't it's a behavioral aspect that men have learned that, hey, look, when I go up to a woman and I say, hey, look, I don't even care about your name. I just want to have sex with you. I don't, you could be the most beautiful man in the world. Again, because women take on more risk with men, she may really want to in her imagination, but because there's so much risk, she will probably say no. So when you have done that from 15 all the way to 45 and you have observed as a man that women do not respond to true transparency of what you want, you get lied to. And that's in person and that's also in dating apps where we are trying to facilitate and connect on a media level. But even if I put my transparency and honesty on that, I still am not selected. So you are lied to with that. And I'm glad that they had that conversation and talked about the data from that.
Hmm.
So I think that's one perspective. And then the other one is it's really hard to get people to think that they're not animals. They just because we have conscientiousness. And so, as most people know, we have a 2% difference between us and gorillas and chimpanzees, right? Or apes. I don't know, not a sociologist, but somebody who just studies stuff like that. I don't know the specific name. He was speaking about we are in the middle of gorillas and chimpanzees. Okay. So and with gorillas, they have I think gorillas, they have a harem, right? They have a group.
Hmm.
But the person protects what is his versus a chimpanzee where they have sex with multiple females. The females have sex with multiple males and produce children with different males. So you have a group of men, a group of men, gorillas that have sex with a woman and protects that that is his seed, right? We will call that more monogamous, right?
Hmm.
Whereas with a chimpanzee, they have sex with multiple females, have sex with multiple males, and have, I think, a group. Now, don't quote me on that. It could be the opposite of what we talk about, right? Because they're
Hmm.
very similar. But the point is, we're in the middle. Like we are meant to be promiscuous and have multiple partners, but then we also have a feeling of wanting to be monogamous with one on one.
Hmm.
And that is a hard place to be in right in the middle because it's kind of like dang, like I'm really fighting my natural urges. I may want to serve one person from a emotional and romantic and mature investment into my family, but I also have biological needs to still want to go and have multiple partners. And that's a hard place to be because it's kind of like, yeah, like, are you with multiple people? Yes. I promise you, like, I don't know why you think that if you talk to somebody, that one, they're not having life before they saw you. And then two, why would you be the only one if you're not the only one on the app? Like, that's a very strange thing for me to comprehend. And again, I'm not incentivized to say, oh, yeah, like, I'm just going to stop whatever I was doing in order to talk to you. No, if you say I want to date and date only you, awesome. You know, if you find a man like that, because there are men like that, that's cool. I know some of my boys that really take it one on one in time, but I promise you, for most men, that's extremely difficult. Again, because there's so much access to sexual activities. So why would it just stop with you? Again, if there's no risk that I'm taking with having multiple of you. So it's a very unfortunate thing, but that's kind of how people need to start to see it. There are biological differences. There are pros and cons to different social. There are differences between reproduction between males and females. There are different incentives for males and females. And so that interrupts the dating pattern and the reproduction pattern that we participate in. That is why it's so difficult. It's not the fact of like, oh, this person's traumatized and that person is not vulnerable and I can get a better person or no, there are real things going around why it's not benefiting either side in that way.
No, I 1000% like agree with a good chunk of that, like just from my own like opinions and perspectives. Cause I think yeah, I've run into people that like 2 days into talking somebody off of Tinder, they're like, "Well, do you think it's just me?" No, give it a couple weeks and
Yeah,
then have that conversation. But you have to be willing to have that conversation. You can't just assume that they're not messing around with like 3 other people. You have to have that conversation. Like I don't care if you're sleeping with other people. I just want to know about it because I have to protect my health and like myself. If you're not sleeping with other people, but you're talking to other people, that's fine. But also, don't get pissy when I'm also talking to other people because it goes both ways, that
that's
kind of thing. And there's not a lot of people that are willing to have that conversation. It
yeah,
wasn't even like a talking stage. It was just somebody that I met. And I was like, just some things they were saying. And finally, I was like, so you just really want casual right now? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, okay. And I just left it at that. And I kept it casual and I didn't like invest anything into it. And, because I could match that energy versus
right.
me like 5 years ago, I would have been like trying to change their mind. Like the number one thing I have learned is when someone tells you something, especially with their actions, you got to believe them. You're not going to stick or if they are just like, I'm not in the mentality for a relationship, the amount of time you stick around is not going to change that.
Yeah, no,
They
absolutely.
know what they have when they have you. Either they're going to change their own mind or keep it moving. And that would have saved me a ton of bullshit in my 20s. But I'm learning it now. And that's why I have the emotional availability of a fucking toaster, because I'm just like, I don't have it. I don't have it in me to like invest in these people that don't want to invest in me. Like, I know what it's like. My last relationship was, we very much invested in each other. So I know it's possible. And I think that's what's kind of like killing it for me, because I'm just like, ugh,
Yeah.
know?
Oh, right. I get it. Like I said, it's for the birds. It
It
really
really is.
is. But I think that yeah, I don't like to mess with people's livelihood either. I'm a
Mm-hmm.
grown man. I care about my health. And so I definitely understand like, hey, there is a common courtesy that again, even if you have the ability to sleep with a woman, you have to understand again that she, as a female, takes on more risk with having sex. Again, the things about not only STIs and STDs, but the ability to get pregnant very easily. And
Mm-hmm.
so she is taking on a risk. And I feel like you should, if you're already going to want to be with her in that capacity, at least be honest with her so that way you don't mess with her livelihood. And people don't understand that while they are dating. Again, people aren't incentivized because, yes, there probably is a high probability that you are on the pill, so it doesn't necessarily matter. And then, two, um, I still have access to other people. So I'm not really incentivized to really tell you the truth. And that's why you kind of have to meet mature people that, hey, we are adults and we can participate in this, but don't mess with my livelihood. As long as you are honest with me about that, I can protect myself and you can protect yourself. So it's a conversation that um, I think again is more had with people that are more seasoned.
Mm-hmm.
But it does come with maturity. Like don't mess with people's livelihood. I don't care if you're dating multiple people. I don't care if you slept with another man 5 minutes before you slept with me. Don't bring me back anything.
Right.
Okay, give the people the autonomy to make a choice for themselves on if they want to participate in this or not.
And to kind of circle back just a little bit, you had mentioned like trauma and stuff like that. How much are you seeing, like, even professionally or even personally, how much people are bringing their old shit into the new shit and not even like trying to work with it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think people need to start getting comfortable with the fact of that you are going to bring trauma. It is how much you are going to bring and the intensity of it. Is it infiltrating your relationships? No, you're meeting another person that has had life before you. Okay, things that have been happening on a subconscious level, and then things that have been happening in a conscious level. They come from a different. They have their own world before they met you. You are going to be influenced. The more time that you spend with somebody to have the high probability of taking on who they are. That's just a given. Friendships and family or romantic, it doesn't necessarily matter, or even at work, you're gonna take on things from people. And so the difference is that when you audit yourself as a person, you need to sit there and go, well, how much can I really take? So, for example, with a Phillip, yes, I've worked with very real, seriously diagnosed traumatic people. Not a fad word, but real heartening, disheartening stuff that have happened in people's lives. So I've been able to not take those stuff on because, again, one, it didn't happen to me. And then two, I'm doing this in a professional capacity. But when I go home, if I dealt with that same type of person, I wouldn't really want to be around that because it's not something that's positive or um, I guess like not like relevant
Right.
to where I'm trying to go. That's not the experience that I really want to have. And so, and I'm definitely not Captain Save a Woman.
No, I always say that. I'm like, I'm not Bob the Builder. I ain't fixing you.
No, right. Like I'm not that again because somebody else has understood their traumas. And yes, they did. They have cards that they were dealt with, but they have understood it. And as long as you don't bring it to me, it's okay for me to have it. And so I think people need to understand about relationships in general, man. Like, you are trying to control so many intangible facets, and you think that they aren't supposed to come with the job. And I know you mentioned um, when you were there's a movement in the book that somebody was talking about where they said that yeah, women are coming to the 9 to 5 and still have to do basically girlfriend or wife duties at
Hmm.
home. And I'm sitting there going, yes, like that that is what comes with that choice. You have to choose that if you are being a wife or a girlfriend or a mother, that comes with you having to do the fucking role. Like you are complaining about something that you wanted, but because it makes you have to change, and you're not incentivized and have been conditioned to have to change yourself in order to accompany other people, you think that that's not where you're supposed to go through. And so yes, it is. And it's the same thing with the husband. Like, I don't know why people think that they are not supposed to do things that they that come along with the choices that they make.
Mm.
And so if you are going to be the wife or the girlfriend, I don't care if you came from a 12-hour shift. If you said you're going to do this and you have this role, you can't just be a wife on paper. You have to do it. That's like us electing a president and then saying he's not being presidential. Like, no, it comes with 16-hour days sometimes. It comes with 4 hours of sleep. Oh, you complain about the kid crying in the middle of the night. You're going to have to wake up. Like, I don't know why you were saying, I'm so stressed. No, that is what came with the decision that you chose. And it comes from women and it comes from men. If you say that you're going to be with this woman, you can't be cheating. You can't be promiscuous. You can't not financially get after it, bro. I don't care if you lose your job. Go Lyft, go Instacart, go sell something. Go do the yard work. Don't make her get on a roof. Change the oil. Make sure the insurance is in place. Like, make sure that the itinerary is set up. Like, you have to do man duties if you decide to be with this woman in that capacity, and you have to do women duties that come with that. But you're in a world that is telling you you don't have to, and how you feel is the only thing that matters, and that what you believe is the only way that it should go, or that what you value is anybody else having to succumb and submit to that, and if they don't, something is wrong with them. No, you are going to have to change. When you have made decisions, that comes with the pros and cons, and that means that you've had to change, and you've done that in different aspects of your life. And so don't think that now that you made this decision, which is a long-term commitment, that it doesn't require that. It does. So stop letting society and the world tell you that it only revolves around you and how you feel. No, you need to operate when you don't feel good. You need to operate and get up when you are tired and drained and pissed off and going through your cycle, and you're not eating and you're dehydrated and you're pissed off and you haven't gotten laid in a minute, and like somebody cut you off in traffic. You have to still perform. Like, you really do, man or woman, if you make the decision to go about this role in your life. And I'm tired of people not talking about that, saying that it should never come with arguments, it should never come with fights, it should never come with disagreements, it should never come with bad experiences, that it shouldn't be negative. Bro, you may have hopefully, maybe have a 30-year marriage. And if 10 of those years was a bunch of shit, or even 15 years was a bunch of shit, those other 15 years are worth it. Deal with it.
Yeah.
Real, man. Like, I'm tired of people victimizing themselves based on that decision. That makes my balls itch. Like, it just pisses me off for real.
No, and like just to kind of clarify, I think what the book was getting into, because like my ex-husband and I both read it, it was basically like women do wind up taking on everything. A lot of the times, like making sure that the insurance was done. That was a me thing. Like my ex-husband worked and paid 99.9% of the bills. So I like was more of a stay at home, but then when I started working, I was still taking on literally everything. And that's where I was like, dude, I need you to contribute a little bit more. I know you're working a bunch, but like I just need you to like, but we never got onto that like minimum standard of care with stuff like that, and that really like contributed to the breakdown. But
Yeah.
um and my marriage wasn't as bad as other women's. I've got friends that their marriages, I'm like, oh my lord, like they are literally handling everything, and their partners are just, I clock in, I clock out, I sit on the couch, I do nothing.
Yeah, I
And it's
definitely
like, no, 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 no. Like you can take your plate to the sink. You can do like these little minuscule things that help contribute to the household and stuff like that, and also to help your partner shut their brain off. Because a good, healthy relationship, you're both able to shut your brain off at different points. It's not just about the woman being able to shut her brain off. It's also about the man being able to shut his brain off. And I feel like we're either on one extreme or the other, when it's like both parties matter, but both parties also, like, there's going to be people that, think women are Satan reincarnate, and people that think men are Satan reincarnate. And I'm like,
searching.
guys, we just need to learn how to fucking
Right.
communicate and deal with our shit. Because
No,
that's like you said, like relationships are not going to be perfect. It's not a Disney movie. There are going to be arguments. There are going to be fights. There are going to be disagreements. You're not going to find somebody that is literally hand painted for you from Pixar and everything's going to be great. Like, that's not how that works. Somebody's going to have a bad day and snap at you, realize that they snapped at you and went, I shouldn't have taken out that on you. I'm sorry. Like, I'm going to go in the other room and decompress for a little bit. And then, like, we'll reconvene when I don't feel like I'm seeing red. And if we communicated more like that instead of just bottling things down left and right, I feel like things would go a little bit smoother.
no, no, you're totally right, Heather, for sure. I think I definitely had a client with that where yeah, I had to put my foot up his ass for sure because his
Mm-hmm.
girl was really struggling to get him to take on more burden. And it is a burden of the relationship. And so, well, how I make it very simple with working with couples, and even in my own life, how I communicate it is the more you have somebody in a managerial role where they have to manage the relationship, the less they get to be in the relationship.
That right there.
So, with that being said, yes, bro, I get it. We know that a dirty office or a dirty space, we know where everything is. It's organized, okay, in our mind, whatever that case may be. But you chose to involve this woman. That means that you are going to have to change. You don't get to be the little boy that you grew up, that how you grew up. This is a man's role to take on another person's life and combine lives. So, yes, bro, I know the dishes are not the biggest fucking deal in the world, but to her, it's like, no, that space of coming home from working her ass off and having a long day, that it just the look of emptiness
Great.
helps.
So nice.
Taking out the trash is something where it's like, even the oxygen and thought of like you said, they don't want to think. So if
Yes.
she has to think about seeing something and then formulating the thought and then having to verbalize it, that communicates stress to her. So yes, just taking out the trash means a lot to them. Um, it could be other small things like I ask you to do this and ask you to do that. But those small things and vice versa, those small things for a partner or for another person mean a lot to them. And it doesn't, I think for both sides, it does not take a lot to love people.
No, it doesn't.
It really doesn't. And again, you're going to have to learn. And like you said, you're not going to find a person to do that. You are going to have to mold yourself and change in order to accompany this person. So something that you may not be used to doing, something you may not even want to do. Like, and sometimes the reason for doing it is for the relationship. And so people have to understand that would you rather somebody experience you so negative for something so small that affects the relationship so big, Or
Hmm.
would you rather swallow your pride, have to say it's in service of somebody else, and that the relationship can thrive that day and in that moment for you to capitalize on it with that person? It doesn't take anything away from you. And so it could be a conversation, it could be a task that they ask you to do, it could be something that they want to address with you. Again, if they have to manage the relationship, then it takes them away of being in it. And
Hmm.
so you have to work out with your person what that looks like. And with different people with different things. Some people it's the cap on the toothbrush. Some people it's put the toilet seat down. It's very small little shits that people, for some reason, those little things mean a lot.
Hmm.
So it doesn't take any way to do that for somebody. But yeah, I've definitely had men where I'm like, bro, she doesn't, she doesn't get to be a woman if she's having to do man shit.
That.
Like, and that's a fact, like, and vice versa. So he was like, no, and he saw that the more that he took on, the less shit that she gave him,
Probably the
and
more lady was getting too, honestly.
yeah, you know what I'm saying?
Like, you take out the trash, like, buddy, let's go. That kind of thing.
Right, no, for sure, and and then one time he was speaking about how he's not getting laid as often. And I'm like, bro, if I was a female and I came home and I didn't see that shit was done, I wouldn't want to suck your dick either.
Mm-mm.
Sorry, but that's the fucking truth. Like, that's not what it is. Like, that's probably not turning her on with that. So why are you being a hypocrite like that? So stop crying about that. So and even if it incentivizes you to say, I want to have that done to me, well then go do the thing that she said. That's all you got to do. 2 + 2 = 4. She gave you the blueprint. You
Literally.
know, and again, it's she rather be doing that to you than bitching to you. I promise you. If you have a good woman, she'd rather be doing that than bitching to you. But you have to take on that role and do your duties for the relationship to keep her in it, which keeps her feminine, which just benefits you as the things that you would want from your partner. So trust me, like both sides get it whenever they come to me on the things they have to be accountable for on what is affecting the relationship. So I've definitely done that with my male clients in couples counseling too.
Yeah, when women say it's the little things, we are literally talking it's the little things. If we don't have to tell you to take the trash out, if we don't have to tell you that we're like we're out of ketchup, and you stop by the store and you saw that we were out of and you're like, hey, I brought home. My
Yeah,
mind is blown.
yeah,
Like, of course I will pack your lunch and make you dinner now. Like, thank you, because now I have the mental capacity to think about what you need.
right,
Because I'm
absolutely,
not trying to think about what everything else needs to happen.
yes.
Because unfortunately, I know for me, like if I have to think about everything else, the last thing I'm thinking about is you.
Ooh, that's a bar.
The
Right,
first thing I am thinking about is how much you're not doing.
right. That's a bar. If I have to think about everything else and I'm not thinking about you, that's a
Yeah.
bar, Heather, for sure.
And
Feel
because
that. That's a
it's
dope.
not
That's
that
a
hard.
no. It's not hard, but it's not hard. So I think there's a difference between things in life being hard and things being challenging. So
Yes.
your life is not hard. Our lives are not hard. Like we're able to have freedom. We, at least here in America, we're able to have our own independency. We have agriculture. We can go to the store. We can become presidents. We can become CEOs. We can do really whatever we want within reason and have that freedom. So our lives are not hard. They are challenging when life has experiences that are thrown at you. So don't get that confused of what is hard and what is challenging. So, yes, when you're giving to somebody else, it may be challenging because maybe it's something that you're not used to doing. Maybe it's something that I have to communicate to you to say, oh, I need this. Cool. I haven't had to do that before. But I noticed, dang, like when I do this small thing that doesn't require that much, it means this much to this person. And so that's not a hard thing. It is challenging. And the only challenge is you keep thinking about you and not thinking about the other person. but you're not in a place anymore when you're just dating and being a single person. If you choose to take on a person, that comes with you having to change, and that comes with molding yourself and challenging yourself in servitude of them, which then serves your relationship. And so people have to be able to do that in order for this thing to work between us.
Yeah, and I think people don't understand that like change is uncomfortable. You have to get uncomfortable. If you are constantly in your comfort zone, you're not growing, you're not evolving. So if you're just like, why am I in the same relationships day to day to day? And I mean, I'm even saying this for myself. Like, why do I just attract fuckboys? Because that's the energy I'm giving off, because I'm not speaking up enough, because I'm not saying that is not for me, move it along. And the more I've been saying that and like cutting things off and not like letting things fester, the quicker they're going. And I'm like, good, there's the door,
Yeah.
And I think as women, when we're just like, oh my God, we just run into one after the other, you're gonna in general, but you determine how long you're willing to put up with that.
Yeah.
And
No,
it's something I'm still learning too, and I still struggle with, and stuff like that. But it's just, you have to be able to be like, I'm not gonna put up with that anymore. Like, no, we're not doing this. And it doesn't matter if I hurt your feelings in the process, because this is not what's working for me, and you're not willing to meet me even like a quarter of the way.
uh,
So it just doesn't work. You go find what you need. I'm going to go find what I need. It's just not working anymore.
right. No, that self advocacy is important. Also, having good, respectable boundaries for yourself, because people are like, especially with boundaries, and I teach boundaries as well, especially with people that have self esteem issues.
Hmm.
Um, is yes, boundaries are good, but you're going to have to compromise your boundaries at some point. And it's not, and again, it's which boundaries that you're going to have to compromise. Because again, it can't always be that people can't tell you or say things or do things that could help you grow. There are some things that are going to have to be stepped over in order for you to be challenged, in order for you to become a better person. But overall, it shouldn't be in a malicious intent.
That.
For sure. So boundaries are important and self advocacy is important. And I think as we are getting older and we are in the space to have more mature decisions that we are making, that requires that to be solidified before you partake in that. And so if you're meeting other people that are not willing or wanting to have the same activities that you are, that comes with being able to say that you don't want to participate in that. And that doesn't make them a bad person.
Exactly.
Um, because again, we're all doing it and it shouldn't be criticized at all of this is a hoe or this is a fuckboy. Like, no, it's just adults wanting to partake in sex as a natural animalistic behavior. There's nothing wrong with that. But if it doesn't match up to having something formidable, then you have to go. And
Hmm.
you've done that with the men in your life, and I've definitely done that with the women in my life. And that's respect for yourself. And there's nothing wrong with anybody ever having that for
It's taken
themselves.
me 33 years to get here, but we're here.
Hey, that's okay. And it's going to change. It's going to change. Like it was different when you were 16, 17. Boundaries were so different,
I didn't
Fuck.
have any.
Right. You didn't even know probably what they were. The word boundaries probably wasn't even a thing that people really kind of throw around on a daily basis. So it's going to change. And maybe when you're 50 and 60, like you can audit yourself to say, this is a new boundary. And this is one where actually I don't really care as much. So if people do this, it is what it is. But so it changes. You don't have to, it's not concrete. It doesn't, stay the same. So it's fine that you're discovering that for yourself. But yeah, there are men out there that they're most men, in my opinion, and most women respect boundaries and respect the wants of others. And yes, our selfish needs are always, and there's nothing wrong with that, being the forefront of how we operate in our lives. But finding people with the consideration of others is a refreshing trait in any type of capacity where a man respects that, hey, you don't want to just fuck around. You're really serious about having a family and being married and producing children. You're just not the woman for me. And that's cool. I'm going to move on to a woman that is still in her promiscuous, not wanting to settle down and be childless phase. So I
Exactly.
think, men should be honest about that, but I also think men shouldn't be ridiculed if they do want to participate in that. I think just both sides have to be transparent with each other.
Yeah. Communication is key. Philip, thank you so much for coming on. This has been enlightening, and hopefully we made a couple people uncomfortable enough to really look and see what they actually wanted.
Start thinking.
So, but yeah, thank you so much for coming on. This has been an absolute I think we all needed this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've learned a lot too. You spit some bars and good perspectives, and I'm glad we were able to build off each other in order to help, try to make the world a better place.
Exactly.